Hello, and welcome to the Megan Taylor Creative Podcast, a show for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business with digital marketing. In this episode, I'll be sharing with you my simple method for creating a content strategy for social media. Let's get started. In this episode of the Megan Taylor Creative Podcast, I wanted to sit down and talk about how to create a content strategy for social media, because social media campaigns, none of them are possible without content behind them. And it's important to create a content strategy that's actually going to help you achieve your goals, because at the end of the day, social media and the most popular platforms require a lot of effort from us. Some of the platforms are requiring us to post multiple occasions throughout the day. And if you really want to do well, you need to be diligent in terms of your planning, and you need to be strategic with the sort of content that you put out there. So this is going to be like a really simplified method. It's the sort of approach that I take with my clients whenever I'm sitting down and talking to them about how to create a social media strategy that makes sense to them and that they can understand. I think that a lot of the time marketers like to overcomplicate things. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's to impress their bosses or because they're afraid that other people might be able to take their positions. But I'm personally in the belief that marketing should be available to everyone, because the internet has given us all an amazing opportunity to be able to create our own businesses and unleash our vision into the world. But in order to do that successfully, we need to know how to market ourselves. And I think eventually people understand, okay, I can't do any of this alone. I'm going to need to hire a team. But that doesn't mean that they can't acquire the skills that they need to be able to craft a good marketing strategy, because the only person that knows your business is you. You're the person that knows your business inside and out. You can teach and train your employees, but you were there when it started. You have the original vision and you understand what kind of messaging and content that you want to put out there. And it's up to you to be able to at least communicate the vision that you want to your team. So with that said, this is going to be quite a long episode as always. So let's just get straight into it. The first tip that I have for you to be able to create a content strategy for social media that's effective is to actually set goals that are aligned with your business objectives. And this may seem like very basic advice, but I think it's advice that a lot of business owners get wrong. I think that when they think about goals for social media, they think they have to do everything all at once. And to an extent, you do want to be able to achieve a lot of your goals to make the most of your social media marketing efforts. But at the same time, I find that the most effective social media marketing campaigns are those that are very laser focused on one particular goal. And the reason why this is so important is not just because it helps you kind of prioritize what you should be focusing on, but it allows you to identify what content that you should really be making. Because for each goal, the type of content that you will need to create will differ slightly. There will be nuances on what features you need to focus on for each platform, for example, and the type of format that you'll be wanting to create, and also whether it's awareness stage content or consideration and decision stage content. So some examples of popular goals that small businesses often set for their social media marketing efforts include raising brand awareness, increasing sales, improving on managing brand reputation, building a loyal community, increasing engagement, and generating leads. Now, all of those might seem like they intertwine together, and again, to an extent they do, but they are also their own separate goals. So for example, increasing sales, you will need to raise brand awareness if you want to get more sales, because you'll need to increase your reach and widen your potential pool of customers. But at the same time, increasing sales and the sort of content that you want to make is going to be very different to just pure awareness stage content. So that's really why it's important to kind of sit down and have a goal setting session. But if you really want to be effective with your goal setting, then you need to follow a framework as well. And the most popular framework that you probably are aware of, but I'm going to touch on it anyway because it's popular for a reason. People use it because it is effective. And this is the SMART Goals framework. If you didn't know, the SMART Goal framework stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Those are the letters of each of the word. That's what they all stand for. And this is a useful framework to follow because it requires you to set goals with specific numbers, but goals that are also achievable and realistic for you. So here's an example of a random SMART goal that I came up with just to kind of show you how to use this framework, that you can kind of start to see how you may implement it into your own goal setting sessions. And the example is to generate 10 leads a month from January the 31st to March the 31st. Now, the way that businesses may approach SMART goals differ. So, for example, they might not be as specific as that, but they might not necessarily focus more on, say, for example, quarterly goals. But for me, I plan everything for each quarter. Therefore, the time period wouldn't just be like by a specific date, although you could do that approach if you wanted to. But because I know I plan everything by quarter, then having that date as the kind of time bound aspect of my SMART goal is really useful for me. And the 10 leads a month, say, for example, if you're a small to medium sized business, you've got a little bit of exposure already and you want to focus on generating more leads and using your established audience already to do that, setting a number like 10, if you've got like a relatively medium sized following on social media, that should be relatively achievable for you. But if you're a much smaller business owner, generating 2 to 3 leads a month is probably going to be more realistic for you. It's all about looking at your business where it is now and thinking, what can I actually achieve? And then setting that as an actual goal. And then because you've set a goal that's achievable and realistic, you're less likely to fail. So you're essentially setting yourself up for success by using this framework. My next top tip for you for creating a social media strategy that's effective is to identify your target audience. And when it comes to social media marketing, knowing who your target audience is everything. And without having a rough idea of who your target audience is and what social media platforms they're using, you could essentially end up wasting a lot of time creating content for a social media platform that your target audience just aren't on, and therefore you're not going to get any engagement and it's going to be really disappointing and you're probably going to feel like social media doesn't work for you. But the reality is that it should do. You just need to identify what channels are the best to use. And the way that I like to do this is generally by looking at my competitors' channels, but more specifically looking at the channels that they are most engaged on, that they have the most engaged audience on. Now, it's very common for a lot of your competitors to have multiple different channels, and I, for one, I'm very big on cross-channel marketing, and that goes for social media as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with using multiple social media channels because it increases your reach and it increases your chance of connecting with someone who is your target audience. But the people that are most successful at social media do really understand the platform that their target audience uses the most, and then they kind of leverage that. So for example, for me, the majority of my ideal customers are serving B2B businesses. So they are a B2B business themselves. Therefore, platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn, where a lot of businesses are active, and using those platforms to increase brand awareness and things like that, that's really important for me to be on there. But that said, I also enjoy using Instagram because I also have a avatar that is working to build more of a B2C business. So it could be people from the photography business. I've had photography clients before, but it could also be someone who is in, the wedding industry or something like that, where it's like more customer focused rather than business focused. But that said, because I know that the majority of leads that I get come from B2B businesses, I do generally focus on LinkedIn, but I do post on Instagram as well. And it's also just a good place to connect with other businesses and build your following and just generally increase brand awareness. You could have some channels that are helping you to achieve different things. So for example, again, for me, LinkedIn and Twitter are more lead generation platforms where I really focus on engagement and networking, whereas Instagram, it's more of a brand awareness thing, and I'm not necessarily focused on generating leads, although I have acquired customers through Instagram, which again is another use case as to why you should use multiple social media channels. I know it's kind of contradictory advice, but at the end of the day, I think it's up to you what you want to use as well. To an extent, you do want to essentially have your focus be on the channels that your target audience uses the most, and then you could maybe post less often but still consistently on secondary channels. And that's kind of my other tip as well, is to essentially use this knowledge that you've acquired about your target audience through your customer avatars and what you've learned about their likes and interests and where they spend their most time on social media through your competitors, and then using this to just choose channels that you will be active on, because that way you won't waste any time. It will be a lot easier to post consistently and still increase your reach without wasting too much time. So, the next tip that I have for you is to optimize all of your profiles. And this is especially important if you're going to be active on multiple channels. You want to make sure that you learn how to optimize your profile on each of those channels, and then make sure that they're all consistent as well. Because if someone finds you on one channel, but they also use another channel, then they may want to find you on that channel too. And I know that it's personally quite annoying when the person that you want to follow has one username on one channel and then is known by something completely different on another channel. And obviously there are kind of limitations to brand names and things like that, but that is something you should consider when you're choosing your business name anyway, is the availability on social media and things like that, because you want to make sure that you're not going to run into the issue where you're not going to have the option to actually use that. Obviously there are kind of like workarounds with it, and you can use special letters and stuff, but personally for me that does look a little bit unprofessional, because that's what a lot of personal users do when they're setting up their social media account. It doesn't give off the vibe of a well thought out professional business that other people might want to engage with. So that's just my personal opinion, but it really does depend on your own situation and what the limitations are depending on that. But it is something to be cognizant of when you are in the early stages of your business and you are kind of still in the ideation stage and generating your brand and your brand identity. It's also important to think about, what you want to be known as on social media. And this again comes into play with how you write your profile and how you optimize. So for example, on Twitter, I'm an agency owner, and for a long time I was known as an agency owner, but I realized about 2 months ago that that was actually really ineffective, because my ideal clients, they're not necessarily going to be searching for agency owners to work with. They're likely going to be searching for freelance writers, because writing and content creation is at the heart of what I do. So although I am an agency owner and I work as an agency rather than as a personal brand, I wanted to be known as a freelance writer on Twitter, so that if people search freelance writer, then they'll be able to find me, hopefully, if my account gets enough traction. And then also the other side of that is kind of niching down a little bit and knowing which niches you want to appeal to. So in my bio, I state that I write for SaaS brands in the fintech, edtech, and agtech industries. So that's obviously, it could be more niche, but the industries themselves are niche enough that I think appealing to 2 to 3 industries, if their niche is okay. But I would still recommend that if you can, actually kind of niching down and finding one industry that you can really appeal to would be ideal. And obviously SaaS isn't necessarily an industry, it's a business model as well. So there's lots of different SaaS brands across industries and across different markets. And generally speaking, most of the businesses that come to me, aside from say digital marketing agencies who just need a contractor to help them complete some projects, which is another customer avatar of mine, most of these SaaS brands, they will be in a specific industry. So, it's all kind of cross industry in that sense, which is why I thought the bio worked. That said, my bio is similar on LinkedIn, but it's very different on Instagram. The way that you optimize your profile is very different to how you optimize on Twitter and how you optimize on LinkedIn. For example, I focus more on my personal brand on LinkedIn, and on Instagram I focus more on my personal brand, and I actually have called myself a content strategist who is helping young businesses unleash their vision with creative content marketing. And then I've got, follow for free marketing tips, and then work with me with an arrow that kind of points to my link tree I think that whether or not you want to use a provider like Linktree so that you can offer multiple links or linking to your website is up to you. I think it partially depends on how optimized your website is, whether you have a core offering that you're promoting in your bio and you just have a landing page built specifically for that, or whether you have multiple offerings. I think if you have multiple offerings, which I do, then actually using something like Linktree is more effective. But at the same time, it is dependent on your business and what you're trying to achieve. But it is important to think about that because there's a lot of debate amongst social media managers whether that's important. And then obviously there's other ways that you can optimize your bio. So things like Twitter cards, for example, or your LinkedIn banner, other links that you can include in your profile. So for example, with LinkedIn, you can include your website link in your profile, but then you can also attach like links to cornerstone content that you might want to show prospective clients so that they can learn more about you and what you do in a better and more efficient way because you've already identified the core pieces of marketing material that they're going to need to understand your core messaging. And yeah, obviously your profile picture as well is very important. If it's personal brand, probably good to go with a image of you, and then if it's a business brand, probably better to go with your logo, as I'm mainly focusing on my personal brand on Twitter first and then kind of advertising my agency second, because I feel like people connect with personal brands before they connect with business brands. I've chosen a profile picture, but the pages that I've set up that are separate for Megan Taylor Creative have my logo. So that just gives you an example of the extent that you can optimize your profile. And it's also important to remember to consistently optimize it. You know, trends change, and it's important to look at your competitors to see what they're doing so that you can be one step ahead of the competition. Now that you've optimized your profiles, you want to start to look at the more practical side of planning your content strategy for social media. And that starts with identifying content pillars. And content pillars and establishing content pillars is some of my favorite tasks to do as a content strategist because it's the very start of your clients' campaigns and it helps them to get really excited about creating content and it helps them to generate new exciting ideas that will make them want to actually make content creation a priority, because I find that a lot of the time we're just so overwhelmed with what content to create that we don't do it. But once we kind of nail down our content pillars and we have an understanding of the content that we need to prioritize for our target audience, then we're way more excited to do it because we have an idea, we have a plan, we know what we need to prioritize. And that is why creating content pillars are ultimately important. But it's also important for your audience as well, because it gives them a good understanding of the sort of content that you create and they can expect, and there's no confusion. If you have more than 2 or 3 content pillars, it's going to get really overwhelming, and you know, they're not going to be as invested as someone who's like really tapped into one specific niche and kind of is the guidebook for that niche. So you want to be that, you want to be like the go-to person, and the best way to get there is to be able to identify 2 to 3 content pillars that you can cover in full. This will also help you with things like your general content strategy as a whole. Say, for example, if you're focusing on SEO content, then you'll be able to reach topical authority. I did a podcast episode about that last week, so I'll link that in the description box below. But yeah, it's just really important to nail these down early so that you can start to flesh out your page and start to provide the sort of content that your audience is really expecting from you, and use your customer avatars to tap into their likes, their main pain points, because that's going to be a big thing. At the end of the day, your content needs to solve a problem in some way or provide value, and the way that you're going to provide value is either through education, through entertainment, or through actually solution-based problem solving. So that's kind of like a new type of value that I think people are really looking for now. They're looking for content that's not just educational, but content that's also going to really help them solve their problem as best as they can, even if that means having to purchase a tool, for example, a piece of software. If they understand the value and the benefits of it because you've shown them how to achieve that solution, then I think customers are more willing to purchase faster because you've already proven to them that you know what you're talking about. Therefore, your product you're offering is going to be valuable to them as well. And finally, after all of this, you're going to want to start to plan your first campaign. And I include this in the same path of planning a content strategy because I don't think that you should really be posting on social media until you at least have some plan. Because again, you don't want your content to come across as rushed, or you don't want your content to appear kind of out of the blue. I think that a lot of audiences can tell when a piece of content has been created without any thought behind it. And that can be really bad for in terms of managing your brand reputation and what people have to think about you. So it's really important to create content that's intentional. And the best way to do that is to plan your first campaigns. And I love planning campaigns that are built around one specific theme, because this way you can focus on building out content from one content pillar at a time. And then the more content that you have around a specific content pillar, which is the theme in this case, the quicker it will be to build authority within your niche on social media. So authority on social media generally means that you're a page that's known for providing valuable content within that niche. And, you'll want to make sure that when you're planning your campaigns, you're identifying cornerstone content first so that you can build that out, prioritize that, and then you can go into more in-depth content once your audience is invested, because they'll have more questions. And your cornerstone content is like, the key pieces of content that really delve into the topic at hand and answer the fundamental questions. But then the subtopics, the more less evergreen but still relevant. So if there's any new trends in your industry, for instance, then you will want to address that in a post somehow. But that's not necessarily going to be cornerstone content because it's not fundamental. It's not a really important part of your industry and the topic that you're covering. And it's important as well to make sure that you're planning not just for the sort of topics that you're going to plan, that you're going to create content around, but the actual content itself. So what type of content will you be creating? Will you be creating video posts? Will you be creating reels? Will you be creating a podcast and repurposing that? How are you going to distribute all your content across your social media channels? Because each social media channel will have different features that you can use and different ways that you can distribute content. So for example, with LinkedIn, you have the classic LinkedIn post, which can just be a text-based post if you want, and these are some of the easiest posts to create. But then they also have things like you can add a internal video, internal image, you can do documents and create a carousel. That's how you create a carousel on LinkedIn. If you didn't know, you create a PDF document that's optimized for LinkedIn and then share that as a document in your post. There's so many features that you can use, and if you're not using all of them, then you're not going to be utilizing your social media platforms to its fullest. So yeah, that's it. That's everything that I have for you today. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you liked this episode, please like the video on YouTube and share it on social media if you think there's anyone that might benefit from it. And also please subscribe to our channel so you can be made aware of any new episodes. And as always, I will speak to you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.